Hello and welcome to another edition of Press Row on Rivalry Family Media. I'm Todd Robbins. Happy to have you along with us for another edition of Press Row as we continue our conversation from earlier this week with Sean Sweeney, sports reporter, Sentinel Enterprise, owner-operator, BayStateSoccerSentinel.com. We thank you all so very much for joining us as we continue our conversation, part two, with Sean Sweeney. We talk a lot about the future of high school athletics as we return to what, dare we say, may be a new normal and even the future of the rivalry itself, right here on Press Row on Rivalry Family Media, part two with Sean Sweeney right now. Two more points on this that I want to hit before we move on, and that is the concept both of the ranking system, Max Preps, which was a decision made. Now, this one is one comparably, right? At least there was a meeting held that explained the statewide tournament. I don't remember there being a Max Preps meeting that was going to explain that, oh, we've already signed this contract. And that was my favorite part of the meeting that I went to when they said, we're not going to be discussing Max Preps here. That decision is done. It's voted on, contract signed. So that's not up for discussion. We're only going to talk about a statewide tournament. Come to find out that the decision on Max Preps was made a year earlier with implementation to begin this coming school year, 2020-2021. So this was a done deal. Now, I've said this to a number of people. I know you're an avid watcher here at Press Row, so you're going to love it when I say it again. As a media member, when I go looking for information, I am always buyer beware of information on Max Preps because I consider it Wikipedia. Anybody can sign up. Anybody can put information into this. So right away, I put a big question mark next to any information I get out of this thing. And then I'm thinking, okay, now it's going to be managing the entire state playoff system in every single sport. There is going to have to be huge clampdown from an MIAA standpoint on data input, checking the data, making sure the data is accurate when you are going out to make these decisions for tournaments. I'm hugely concerned about this Max Preps component. However, I will say, surprisingly, at about a 50-50 rate, the number of coaches that are supportive of Max Preps as their decision-making process, and I'll point to two that I interviewed on this program, both Devin Gates, who used Max Preps as part of the recruiting process when he coached at the collegiate level. He said Max Preps is pretty good. He's pretty, okay with this being the direction they go. And then Leominster lacrosse coach Colin Davis, who said lacrosse has been using it now for about a year when they lost Lax Power as a previous ranking system. They went to Max Preps, and they've been pretty pleased with it. So I've been encouraged to hear that coaches that do have experience with it do think that some of the issues that I see as an information source can be remedied. That made me feel a little better. Where do you stand on Max Preps?
I have all the respect in the world for Devin. I thought him getting the Leominster job was probably the greatest thing I think I've ever heard. And obviously Colin Davis, I don't think there's a better guy to teach the game of lacrosse to a bunch of kids. And I respect the hell out of them. What I think is going to happen here, this is going to be a colossal failure. I think so. You're going to have people reporting the scores.
Let me stop you for a second and let me cite back to a Sean Sweeney tweet. Look at the last sentence of this tweet. This new quote, this new system is going to implode, and I want to be nowhere near the crater, end quote. Please continue.
You got another one for me? But no,
as a matter of fact, I do.
I'm sure you do. That is 100% fair because I've sat in newsrooms waiting for coaches to call to report their scores to us, whether it be for the Sentinel or whether it be, and I'll be honest, I didn't work the desk at the TNG, but you want to know something? There have been days that they have waited pretty patiently for the scores to come, and sometimes they just do not come. So are you telling me that this system is going to be run or have data inputted by people who can't spend 5 to 10 minutes putting together a small little blurb about their team and their game, win or lose regardless, and send it to the newspaper, or to put together a box score and send that in? Or you're going to have a coach who only wants to concentrate on coaching the kids. He doesn't want to take care of any of that admin stuff. So he's going to have to delegate it to somebody else who is probably underpaid as it is, or is just a student volunteer. There's a lot to be said about for how they want to do this, how they want to implement it. And another thing is that the whole thing about the rating system, this is all done by Max Preps.
Mm-hmm.
They're not giving any data as to how they are coming up with this formula to the local newspapers. Because I'll tell you something, one of the things that I totally enjoy is when Jim Wilson or Jim Clark is putting out their tournament breakdowns. And I've tried to do that myself at the Sentinel to a varying degree of success, as I punch myself in the face. But you know what? That's going to take money out of my pocket. Another thing about this whole thing that I don't like. I love trying to do this, and we don't know if it's going to, and we know it's going to be 50%. That kind of just makes no sense, because when you're going to be going up against teams with a 90% or 95% winning percentage, you already know the result of that score in that game. So it is what it is. I think it's going to be a colossal failure. And read the tweet again. Read the tweet.
Quote, "This new system is going to implode, and I want to be nowhere near the crater."
Exactly. That's exactly what I tweeted. I'm smiling thinking about that tweet, because it's you're gonna have difficulty getting these coaches to input the information. I don't see it really working out.
One of my favorite parts of the suggestions I've heard since this tournament has come in is obviously a credit to both Jim Clark, Jim Wilson, a lot of the folks that are involved at both the Telegram and other media sources, that they perhaps will be somehow drafted or implemented in controlling this data, which, I mean, we all know when you're talking about these systems, we've been to the postseason meetings, how many people, go to, telegram.com/home team, fire up the rankings because they know that they are accurate, which
Correct.
speaks a lot to the media. But should they be the governing body of, a tournament, or be responsible or enlisted to help in some way to put the data together? No. And I would say
they don't get paid for that, Todd.
I agree.
They don't get paid for that. You know what? Jim Wilson and Jim Clark provide an excellent service. And I've talked with both Jimmies about this, and you know what? They say, this is for you guys, so you can do this. You know what? If Max Preps was to come to me and say that, I'd say, go screw yourself. Where's the paycheck? Are you going to give me some money for this? No, I'm not going to put myself into this this crater, as I so eloquently tweeted. No, and Jimmy should not be put into that position. Of course, if they want to, they can. It's their,
It's
that's
my
their
prerogative. I believe that's a song somewhere
Yeah.
along the way. You won't catch me doing it. That's for certain. But I was interested that is something that has been proposed as part of this process as well. The other key to this that I really, particularly in talking with coaches in North Central Mass, have been really struck by is this piece about placement. It's not just so much about the formula, the bracket, and all those things, but what division am I going to be expected to compete in is hugely kind of questioned or open-ended in where that's going to fit in this process. And one of the things that really struck me about an interview I did here on Press Row was with Fitchburg Athletic Director Craig Antossi, who talked about Fitchburg and the types of meetings that they attend and the types of schools that they get lumped in with as quote-unquote urban schools. Schools like Springfield schools, which Springfield has multiple high schools, but they meet frequently with Springfield schools, with Brockton, with Fall River, and other quote-unquote urban schools that are twice, we'll use twice conservatively, but in some cases 3 times as large as the population physically in numbers of body as Fitchburg, and they're considered to be the same kind of schools, they're not even close. They're not even close from numbers. You couldn't put Leominster there. Leominster's only marginally larger than Fitchburg is. You couldn't put them into the same kind of component. Gone are the days of considering, Central Mass schools to be like and akin to a Brockton, a Springfield. They're just not. There are just way more people in those urban centers. So somewhere along the West, use straight population of the school for placement, but yet that is the direction they are heading. They're even going to get away from gender norming the numbers and saying, well, football is a boys' sport, therefore we'll use boys enrollment. We're getting away from that. They're talking about it's just going to be total enrollment. You got 1,200 kids in your school, then your school size is 1,200. Where do you fit in the overall number? That's how we'll decide the decisions. And the only schools that will get any kind of consideration potentially are single gender schools like a St. John's or a Notre Dame Academy, where they'll have to figure out a multiplier to get them to fit in with the other schools that are more their kind. I think there has to be something more than straight enrollment or gender-based enrollment that's got to be considered here. And I was glad to hear that Midwatch is trying to lead the way. They're trying to find ways to make their schools fit into systems that are more than just, okay, you have number X, therefore you are Y as far as division goes.
The only thing about this whole thing that I think I might actually enjoy is that Fitchburg isn't going to be limited in Division I. By the numbers that I have seen, they would be put in Division II, maybe Division III, if Craig Antossi can finagle the appeal. And you know what? For years, I've been like, I'm using the colloquial "we" as an alum, not as a journalist. And of course, my wife works at the school too, so I'm part of the family again. Still.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I've said for years that Fitchburg should not be playing a Division I schedule. There's no way. They can't compete. Not anymore. And I'll probably get lambasted for saying it. But yeah, put Fitchburg in Division II, Division III. If you're going to go with 5 divisions across the state, they could be Division III. They could play with similar sized schools. And I like that North Middlesex is going to be in the right spot. And I like that St. John's is going to be playing the schools that they should be playing instead of playing the schools that they are. So that is a good thing. But you know what? I say, and I've said this before, I told this to James Bunnell, the AD over at Lunenburg, you know what? Let's rearrange the schools to the size and keep them in the sectional tournament. How about that for an idea? Like, really? You couldn't do this a long time ago and have it right perfectly? I think that's something that should be addressed. It won't because, I'm just an idiot with a keyboard and an opinion. But, hey, it is what it is. And they've already made the decision. We're going to have to live with it for 4 years or whatever until, through this cycle to 2025. And after that, they're going to look at it again. And hopefully, this isn't about, I want the kids to succeed, but I also want them to be in that position that they're also succeeding academically. And if this is going to take away from academics for their weekend study time, like I said, spending half a day on a bus, going to Cape Cod, and by the way, you're gonna take that trip to Orleans or to Falmouth or to Yarmouth Dennis. Or Monomoy, or name a school beyond the bridges. You better leave at like 4:00 in the morning, or you're never going to get across the bridge in time for your game. So enjoy that.
Certainly something that has to be considered as well as we consider and move through this tournament process. Sean Sweeney joins us here on Press Row. Sean, I want to hit a little bit on this kind of a broad state of athletics. We've hit on, the specifics of this statewide tournament. But, when I think about the state of Massachusetts athletics, aside from this pandemic that obviously has been going on and some of the tournament votes and other things that are happening, I certainly have been this year concerned with, I think, more broadly, where is the world of high school athletics in Massachusetts going at this point in time? You alluded to it earlier. Is it a lot about, getting the seat at the table at the federation and being able to influence national policy? And is that to the general benefit of things? But I've thought also through these broadcasts and in asking, athletic directors and coaches some of these questions, when I think about the MIAA and I imagine what those meetings are like and kind of what they're pictured as. And then when I think about the uninitiated, think of those as they imagine them as a legislative body with representatives from each school district sent to a larger meeting, and that they're going to ultimately do what is in the best interest of sport or in the best interest of their student athlete. They're going to do the altruistic thing. Unfortunately, that's not how this system is set up. This system is much more akin to the League of Nations or the United Nations or whatever your favorite kind of confederation is, if you will. It is representatives get sent to a meeting. They each come from their own individual part of the state, each with their own individual, issues, whether you're a large city like, Springfield or Worcester, where you have one athletic director representing 4 or 5 high schools, or you are, an AD who's, a part-time AD and also teaches health or gym or math or chemistry or whatever at a school district. And oh, by the way, you get a couple of hours a day to schedule the buses and make sure that there's meetings and go to the MIAA in a very small town environment. There are huge gaps in what does, athletics look like in different parts of the state. So all of these representatives come to this meeting and they have to, kind of make the best decision for first their school or their community, then their league, which plays into this conversation. Then they can talk about their sport, and then obviously what's best on a statewide principle. And I asked that question of Air Shirley AD Steve Kendall, and I thought he was the one that gave me kind of that order, is that ultimately you start with what's best for your locality, honestly, because they're the people that sign your paychecks. So they are most directly what's on your mind when you go out there. Well, now, again, from the outside looking in at this, I'm sitting there going, well, hang on a minute. Everybody has their own poll, 100 and some odd, almost 200, different viewpoints, opinions, cities, towns, all these things that play into this. How can you possibly do what's best for sport and what's best for a student athlete when you can't get beyond what's best crossing your own threshold in your own school district?
I think Steve is obviously right on there, and I don't say that as a former Air Shirley coach, doing JV boys soccer last year, and Steve and I have butted heads in friendly manner about this whole thing. Love Steve, respect the hell out of him, but he's right. You have to put your student body interest first and your athletes first, and then worry about the next step. So yeah, I mean, you obviously have to think about that first. And during Steve's interview with you, he brought up a lot of points. And I was on that bus ride to the first bus ride to Whitensville Christian, and that was a hell of a bus ride. So you're going to have hell of a lot longer bus rides to some of these other parts of the state. And of course, it's a bus. It's not exactly the most comfortable mode of transportation when you're 4 years old. But yeah, you obviously have to put your students first, and then the league. I think that's, and hopefully when you go to your league meetings, you're all somewhat on the same page. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. I follow Steve's lead on that, and I know a lot of the other athletic directors in our area are in that same boat. But yeah, and I consider myself to be a partner with these ADs and promoting their student athletes. So yeah, I'm hoping that they're thinking about tournament coverage and newspaper coverage and for your regular season games and whatnot. So but yeah, you're definitely thinking about your students first.
in some ways, I think about, and this is an example now that's getting quite frequently used because of the talk of the statewide tournament. They're using the NCAA as a frame of reference. When I think about when an NCAA committee comes together, the committees are usually comprised, depending on the type of committee. But if you're talking about a tournament committee, they're comprised of athletic administrators, former coaches, folks that have, like Condoleezza Rice, some kind of a connection to, university systems and administration of education, not so much maybe an expertise in athletics. They have a name or a connection, but they are also at that moment in time not representing any one individual school. They're being sent to a meeting to make decisions free of the bans of these other schools that they work at. So in some ways, I feel like if that's how we're going to handle this and we truly want to get there, maybe what we do need is a committee or a series of committees that are guided by former administrators, former athletic directors, people who are no longer directly bound to a specific school district, who are free of those things, that perhaps when you think about people that I've talked about before on this broadcast, you grab Ray Cosenza, you grab, Ron Mazzaferro, you grab people who are no longer directly involved with athletics because they've retired and they've done their piece, and you ask them back in, but this time you say, look, you're free of everything. We need you to go guide this sport X, and you need to go in this direction. You help us get to the direction of what's best, free of the bonds of worrying about your school districts, and maybe we would get some results and some information and some decisions that might be more in the best interest of student athletes and in the best interest of sport, and not be conflicted by, obviously, you want to be in a scenario for your own school and your own student athletes where you are safe to participate, you can afford to participate, that you are in a competitive place where, and coaches have said to me, you're not going to have a competitive program if your team doesn't win. So obviously you're trying to make decisions based on what's going to help your team win. And if your team doesn't win, then likely your program is going to go bye-bye. That's no good. You can't be bound by that and also be making the best decision for how to place people in brackets and how to put people in divisions and all of those things. That there seems to me to be this need for, we need a group of people brought in from the outside that aren't bound by, have expertise in athletics, but aren't bound by specific school districts.
And the interesting thing about that, now that you mentioned that, a lot of the MIAA tournament committees, not tournament management, but like the basketball tournament, was for the longest time organized by Roger Bacon, the former principal at Oxford. You got Bob McNamara from I believe he was from the Shrewsbury, Worcester area, who was the baseball tournament guy. The late Rich Lewis from Wachusett and St. Bernard's graduate. He was the softball admin for the longest time. So yeah, you have these people available. Use them in some capacity. I don't know how you would do that. Obviously, are you going to give them a salary the size of Richard Pearson or the older gentleman at the MIAA? I can't even think of his name.
Bill Gain.
Bill Gain, thank you. Are you going to give them give these people that same type of salary? I think there's a lot of questions about that. So I like the idea. They're already doing it at the sport level. Do you do it for the full thing? That's another question, because then that gets into MIAA budgets and how much are they going to charge in order to pay for these people.
It certainly does. It renders me to this question. Under the current system, with the way decisions get made, can the existence of self-interest provide a level playing field? Can you have people choosing and creating fair competition if you have self-interest that's part of the decision-making process?
I don't know. If I knew that answer, I'd be with the MIAA probably, but I really can't answer that, Todd. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We ask the questions, we parse them out there, and truthfully, I don't know that I know the answer. I think my instinct would be just based on the fact that a lot of times I eat lunch with my colleague who teaches economics, and rational self-interest is one of those lessons. Well, if rational self-interest, if I as athletic director of X school is going to make a decision, rational self-interest would say I'm going to make the best decision for my school. I mean, that's what they're telling you has to happen. Well, in that case, if you're making the best decision for your school when you're casting a vote, then you're not necessarily making the best decision for sport, or the best decision for the game, or the best decision for the student athlete, or the best decision for the competition. So somewhere along the way, there is a disconnect in the ability to provide a fair and level playing field, and it's not purposeful. I say this when I ask questions like this. I don't believe anybody's trying to do anything that is ill-fated or attempting to create a problem. It's just common sense, and humanity says these things are a part of that. Therefore, the playing field favors somebody or something or someone, or at least you're going to try to make decisions that are going to favor something. When you go in and make a decision, you do need, in some ways, somebody that's disconnected, whether it's the concept of a sport commissioner or somebody that can make decisions that is not bound by an individual school district.
Yeah, I see your point. I love the idea in theory and probably on paper too, but that like I say, you got to go back to what the MIAA is doing, and the amount of money that they bring in, and how much are you going to pay these people in order to do it. I love the idea. I love the idea of a Ray Cosenza or a John Dobzinski who are now removed from their schools. Roger Bacon for 30 some odd years, the head of basketball. I would love to see the next person to go in and do that sort of thing. And you know what? Maybe what we need is a board of people, not just the tournament management committee, but like a board emeritus of former principals and ADs that will come together, once a month or twice, every other month, and do that. Again, how are you going to pay them for their time? Because this is obviously, an expensive venture, because there's so many things. And, just make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons, which is, of course, for the kids as a whole, and not just their individual school districts. I like the way you're thinking.
Somewhere along the way, we will hopefully see some of this play in. And of course, this year, we talk about what we've seen, across this year, going all the way back to last August, when obviously heat was an issue with getting the beginning of the fall season started in August, and getting, those typical double session days when you go back, that wasn't an option, that past year. Then you get into the Triple E affecting schedules for night games, things that we were talking about earlier, needing to play games earlier because mosquitoes come out at a certain hour, and those mosquitoes were carrying a bloodborne pathogen. That was a problem. And then you get into, obviously, the new rules that were coming in football and volleyball and ice hockey and baseball, and in other places that, hadn't previously had some rule changes that were being instituted. Then we get into the winter season, and it seemed like maybe the winter season felt a little bit closer to normal, but all the debate about the statewide tournament certainly came up. And then, lo and behold, we get closer to spring, and we're in the COVID-19 chaos that has been, the last handful of months, and we have no spring sports season in spring of 2020. When you look at that in totality, Sean, and you think about the status of high school athletics at this point in time, what is the state of high school athletics in Massachusetts right now?
I'm very proud to be a part of high school sports in Massachusetts, especially with these ADs and the way that they were able to really bounce on the fly, Todd, to go with these, to make these changes. I know the AD at Marlborough said he would rather go without fans than not have the game and perish the gate, regardless. And that's very, very noble and good. But yeah, this year has been one of the craziest years in the 27 years that I have been writing high school sports in this area, and Central Mass as a whole. Triple E, wow. Actually completely forgot about Triple E, because a lot of my games weren't really affected by it because it wasn't affected up north here for the most part. The wet bulb reading, I remember that from when I was over at Air. Steve had the wet bulb, and luckily, our practice sessions really were not, our training sessions were not affected by that. We didn't have to take those breaks every 20 minutes or whatnot, and not even in the games, in our matches. We weren't affected by that, thankfully. But I know that there were some, like football, they get started that week before, so they had to do the wet bulb reading and pause their practice, in the middle of installing their offense and whatnot. Yeah, that was it was a weird fall. It was a weird fall, and I know from your perspective, you're getting out of Watertown at 2:30 or something like that, and you're hauling ass to Marlborough for a 4:00 game on the radio. Bless you and Kate and Billy for doing all that. But yeah, and then like you said, the winter was very, very normal. With the exception of the fact that we didn't have a lot of snow postponements, which was a good thing, and good for my wallet, obviously, because I didn't have to lose a lot of games due to snow, thankfully.
You talk about a weird year in weather, though. When you put this into perspective, this would have been one of few years where you likely could have tried out outdoors in March and started at the appointed time at the beginning of April with high school athletics. And this is the year that you get a complete shutdown of high school athletics.
Exactly. I mean, we could have been making money and covering games and playing games that first week of April, which in a little bit, I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because I was able to work on this house a little bit more, work on my office and get it painted and replastered and work outside and get some of those things done that I would probably still be doing right now if we had games. But yeah, it's been one of those weird school years that, again, I don't remember another year like this. And honestly, I don't want to see another year like it again.
No question about that, indeed. And we are at Watertown, are one of those experimental school districts. Final bell rings at 3:05. So take that for what you will as we go through the process, through the whole thing. And of course, that points again to schools that are going to run into difficulty. There are a number of schools in Eastern Mass that are going to this concept, and it is starting to trickle this way with school districts considering shifting time. And obviously, should this pandemic continue and education continue, I've heard things floated like double sessions and double bus runs and all of these other things that are going to shorten days or elongate days, depending on which direction you go, or create more days that you have to have, school in order to obviously provide the opportunity for athletics to exist. There's so many unanswered questions. And I think part of that is what has, I think, made this last year so difficult for people to navigate, not just the student athletes, but the coaches and the administrators and everybody else. There's been a lot of things thrown at them along the way. And while we're at it, I will tip my cap again to the folks at the MIAA and how they handled, obviously, this spring season, as they did everything they possibly could, short of coming up with a vaccine that would allow everyone to go back and play. They extended the deadline to play this game to the absolute nth, whether it was baseball, softball, lacrosse, or any of the other track and field, any of those other spring sports that are so important and so exciting for student athletes. They did everything they possibly could, and just the clock ran out. The pandemic didn't turn the way they hoped it could. And obviously that forced the final cancellation of the spring 2020 season. But they did everything they could, short of curing the disease, to allow the spring to exist.
Yeah, they did. They absolutely did. And, you took the words right out of my mouth, Todd. And they did what they had to do to give hope to so many student athletes across the Commonwealth. But I think that a lot of the coaches, and yes, being optimistic, being hopeful is wonderful. It's great. But you know what? Some of these coaches really needed to be realistic, especially given the way that this pandemic was climbing. This is the opportunity for life lessons, and one of those life lessons is you can be hopeful all you want, but you're not going to get the result that you want. And in this case, you kind of had to be realistic that this was not going to happen, regardless of how long you postponed it or held off like the MIAA did. They waited until Governor Baker said, okay, this is it, this is done, and that's it. So I give them, full credit for giving them hope. But you know what, saying they should have said, you know what, and obviously I don't have the transcripts in front of me, but there's a good chance that this isn't going to happen. And so I think that once we get towards July, let's not necessarily give hope for the fall. Go back to what Steve Dobzinski said, and let's postpone things right from Jump Street, and let's squeeze it in a timely fashion, in a fashion that's not going to be harmful to the athletes, obviously. But yeah, I think that the MIAA did a good job. I think the only thing that I will needle the MIAA for is at the end of the basketball tournament season there, was the whole thing during the state semifinals. I remember staring at my computer, waiting for something to come through. And the MIAA was saying, we have to have fans at our games, when Worcester State was saying that, no, you can't have fans at the games because of social distancing. And the way I translated that was that the MIAA wanted the money. They wanted that gate. They wanted to make sure that they could secure that gate, obviously for the trickle down of other sports as well. But, they finally relented. They decided, no fans, just official personnel. They kind of, they relented on that finally. So yeah, but that was the MIAA being the MIAA for one last go in the 2019-20. But then they did the right thing in giving these athletes hope, even though a lot of us were like, this isn't going to happen.
The thing that we do know, if we look ahead to that concept of 2 months, Fitchburg and Leominster could play on Easter Sunday, which is Sunday, April 4th, 2021, which, you could have a Thanksgiving football game delayed.
What day was that?
Sunday. April 4th, Sunday, April 4th is
I will pencil that in.
Possibilities.
I think that you, me, Kate, and Billy will go somewhere for pancakes and a little bunny breakfast, and then we'll make our way to Doyle.
It is definitely a possibility that we have to consider in the cards, and it would ultimately reward those people that said they wanted a meaningful Thanksgiving Day game again, because it would fall right in the middle of a March-April football season, not at the tail end of it.
I'll give the football committee a lot of credit too. You and I have known for years that once the MIAA went to this statewide tournament for football, and going 8 divisions and expanding the playoffs and doing what they've done, it made Thanksgiving absolutely positively meaningless. You know that, I know that. Some of the old fogies, old timers, they don't get that. But give the football committee full marks for trying to make Thanksgiving relevant again, in some way, shape, or form, and we'll see how that comes up in the June meeting.
I certainly hope that it does, although I will disagree only to this account. I think anytime you put Fitchburg and Leominster together, or any of the other great rivalries, they persevere. They get beyond whatever impediments they have survived over all these years. That's how you get a series that is hundreds of games old, is by overcoming whatever impediment the world throws at you. And this may be another impediment with this form of a pandemic that may force it to another other time of year. But it also, by the same token, if they're able to rearrange a traditional football season, not necessarily this year, but in the years to come, and can bring Thanksgiving back into this conversation, I certainly think it would be an exciting, piece of the puzzle as well. But I'll tell you, Sean, I will keep going with the pageantry, the drama, the majesty of that game every single year and every single time they play, regardless of it's the only football game in a season or whether it is a game outside of the regular season as well. I just think the rivalry is just too important to worry about where it fits in the grand scheme of the competitive nature of things.
I'll tell you, this past November, covering Fitchburg Leominster for the second time on Thanksgiving and doing it at Crocker Field. I know you were in the other booth, but I'm sure you felt the floor shaking because of the adrenaline rush that was going through me. I love Fitchburg Leominster, you know that, but I'll end on this note. What if we go back to the 20s again, and we go back to the 19 teens again, and we have, say, Fitchburg versus Leominster earlier this season, and then Fitchburg Leominster on Thanksgiving? I kind of like the thought of that. Give both schools that nice gate, that nice boost to the coffers. I know that one athletic director is thinking about parsing or putting that forward. I love that idea. I would love the idea of Fitchburg Leominster playing on a week 1, because you'll remember that when the schedules came out, not this year but last year, and when I saw Oakmont playing Gardner on week 1, I thought that was a typo because of the 40 years that they had played on Thanksgiving, and so I looked through some of these things, and then I texted the AD over at Quabbin, Mark Myville. I'm like, what's going on with this? You guys aren't playing Gardner until Thanksgiving. This is a typo, and because they were playing Lunenburg, and then when I found out that Lunenburg was playing Oakmont, I thought that was wonderful again. But yeah, playing your old Thanksgiving rival on week 1, I thought that's absolutely brilliant. And I think, one of my family members said to me when I had posed that, it's like, would you like to see Fitchburg Leominster play on week 1? I'm like, abso-freaking-lutely. Play them on week 1, get that nice gate, or if not week 1, play that game, that first Fitchburg Leominster game, play that on Columbus Day weekend, when you have all the kids home, all the recent graduates, that would be amazing. I love the idea, and I'm sure Tom DiGiorno and Devin Gates are just shaking their heads. No, don't do this. Why put that idea out there? I love the idea. I think it would be wonderful for both schools to get those big gates. And like I said, what's going to happen if you don't have football this fall and you have that Thanksgiving? You depend on that Thanksgiving gate. I know like a Leominster or an Oakmont or a Fitchburg, they would be able to withstand it. But some of these other schools, I'm really concerned. What if you don't have that Thanksgiving football? What is going to happen to your budget?
It certainly does pose an interesting idea, but I love the concept of the bookend, the first game of the year and the last game of the year every year. I think it's a great idea. People are always talking about respecting the rivalry. Well, if you look back in history does show that was a thing. You played twice a year. Things weren't necessarily always locked on to Thanksgiving. And again, anytime you can get Fitchburg and Leominster together in just about anything, it's good for broadcast, it's good for interest, and I think it's good for the sport. So I'm a big fan of whatever that sport may be, and I love the idea. But I'll also say this: it will also help when you are dealing with some of these other schedule makers and ADs who are putting together these ideas when they go, oh, no, I can't play Team X because they're my Thanksgiving opponent. And so it affects competitive balance, particularly in the sport of football, where they can't play that Team X because they are Thanksgiving rivals. So you don't have the ability to create a true balanced schedule. Well, if Leominster and Fitchburg can turn around and play twice a year and can play once during the regular season and once on Thanksgiving Day, and it matters and it's meaningful and it packs the stadium twice a year, the same way that it did when they played those wraparound playoff games against each other under the previous system, when you played Thanksgiving Thursday, the following Tuesday, and the state championship that Saturday, the 3-game and 9-day model. While it was
I love
not
that.
great, I loved it. It wasn't great for player health. I get it, but I love it. I really
the journalist side in filling pages, I love that. Working on it 2 days instead of trying to find a lot of sidebars to fill the paper. We're going to a game on a Tuesday after Thanksgiving. That was wonderful. I loved it.
It was absolutely a great idea, but it was not phenomenal for player health. So I understood why they did away with it. So fine, let's still play twice a year. Let's move them apart, once in the regular season, once on Thanksgiving. Create a true balanced schedule, and obviously create what I think would be phenomenal buzz in the rivalry. And again, you do it for a period of time and you see what happens. You obviously went through playing each other twice a year. In the early part of this rivalry, you got away from it and went to this every other year hosting on Thanksgiving format, but playing every single year, one time a year. You've done the playoff thing where you do play twice a year, and it led to phenomenally packed stadiums and great football games that were close together. I mean, Fitchburg and Leominster didn't just play twice a year. They played twice within a matter of days of one another. It doesn't get much more exciting than that as far as filling stadiums go. So you take that part, you put it into this concept. I like it. I say let's go for it. And the other thing that I think it creates a possibility of that I think people would be more willing to accept, that I think would be a natural evolution of this rivalry, would be when opportunities like an Army-Navy type opportunity to play the game at Fenway Park, to play the game at Gillette Stadium, to play the game at Boston College, to play the game at Foley Stadium in Worcester, when those opportunities to move this rivalry around a little bit, the way the Army-Navy rivalry gets to move around. And yeah, they do typically play in Philadelphia. That tends to be the home of that game. But they do from time to time go play in Baltimore, New York, and other places. And it moves the excitement of that rivalry around and still is a hugely exciting rivalry. Fitchburg and Leominster is commonly compared to that rivalry. If you truly believe in it, then you can move that rivalry around to a larger stadium and still pack a bigger building for that one special opportunity that you were going to do it in a decade time period.
Yeah, I mean, Fitchburg and Leominster twice a year in the fall. We do it during basketball season. We do it during baseball season, softball. I think that's a license to print money. And I think that, if done right, it could be really, really huge. You can always have that first game of the year as your regular price admission, or maybe a couple bucks more, and then have your Thanksgiving be your normal, your $10 or whatever ticket price. It's a license to print money. And I know that, I don't necessarily think those two schools are actually hurting by any stretch of the imagination, but if you can get that extra gate and get that in there, and presumably put that money towards user fees and try to knock those user fees down, do it.
For the moment, it stays a pie in the sky concept, but it's a pie in the sky I'll order 2 helpings of. I'm certainly love the idea. I'd be happy to serve on the committee. Love to see it to come down should the opportunity come to pass. Sean Sweeney, so fantastic to have you here on Press Row.
You waited long enough.
We'll say we're out of time for the moment, so we're going to just put a pin in this and come back to it again, hopefully, when we find out exactly what athletics are going to look like for 2020-2021.
Todd, always a pleasure. And of course, thank you for having me on and taking my mind off of what's going on in my personal life. This was definitely well needed. And with what's happening and I'm not going to be doing stories for the time being. I posted that on Twitter last week. This was a chance to have a little bit of normalcy when that new normal that we've been talking about. Oh, Spooky's back. Hi, Spooky. This was definitely needed. Thank you so much, and obviously for rescheduling We were supposed to do this last week, but obviously things happened. I had some anger, I had some angst that I needed to get out, and I definitely appreciate having that opportunity to talk to you and the viewers, and hopefully we'll be back together soon. Not 6 feet apart.
Agreed.
But packing that Doyle press box. I love going into Doyle. There's no place on a Friday night that I'd rather be than at Crocker Field. But you know what? Going to Doyle, working with you, working with Bill and Kate, and obviously Dick Tucker and the Leominster folks, they make it feel like it's a third home. And I really do, appreciate the folks at Leominster. Being a Fitchburg boy, we were taught kind of to hate Leominster, but working with Leominster, and I'm sure it was the same way with you guys hating us in red. But I've developed an appreciation for the way that Leominster goes about their business, the coaching staff and the fans and pretty much everyone involved with Leominster athletics. So I like going to Doyle. They got good food. There's good conversation, great people, and I take no sides in the rivalry anymore.
It's one of the. I was going to say. I've noticed. It's one of the.
That was a fundraiser for the Fitchburg Ski Club, so I had to.
And it's phenomenal. I've got the Blue Devil tie. I'm not going to lie. I was another
the Fitchburg tie.
Fundraiser run by our friends no longer with us as Shacks, but a great fundraiser.
I wear my Fitchburg tie once every 2 years at the Fitchburg Hall of Fame. I serve on the committee for that, and as the secretary and as the the historian after the passing of Brett Sullivan last year. So it's just it's a fun rivalry. I love it. I would love to see it go to twice a year, and there's so much respect both ways. Flowing from Fitchburg to Leominster and back and forth.
It certainly is great, and an honor and a privilege to get to cover it on behalf of both communities. And we thank you so very much for being a part of this edition of Press Row. Like, subscribe, all the information right there on your screen here on Press Row. For Sean Sweeney, I am Todd Robbins, saying thank you so very much for joining us. And until next time, so long, everybody.